Looks like folks are filtering in, so I'll kick us off. Well, welcome. Thank you for joining us. If you're looking to orient yourself in time and space, you are at the Connecticut Affordable Housing Conference. It is 1:30 p.m. We are very excited to have you here. Conference features local, state, and national experts that lead conversations exploring challenges, sharing best practices, and coalescing us around critical next steps to address key affordable housing issues in our state. This year's focus is building stability, and each session spotlights a unique approach to strengthening housing stability for households and communities across Connecticut. You can join our conversation. We've been live tweeting the whole event on Twitter using the hashtag CAHC 2022. And our Twitter, you can follow us at CAHC Housing. The session you are at today, if my slides will advance forward, is the Legislative Roundtable conversation. We're super excited to have a few of our legislators here with us and representatives, and I will pass it off to them in a moment, but I want to do a quick round of thank yous to our leading sponsors, the Connecticut Department of Housing, the Connecticut Housing Finance Authority, La Rosa Building Group, the Melville Charitable Trust, and Wells Fargo. We couldn't do all of this without you, so we super appreciate your support. Same goes for our collaborating sponsors. You can see here, Bank of America, Hartford Foundation for Public Giving, Key Bank, Rockport Mortgage Corporation, Webster Bank. Thank you so much. And same for our armful of supporting sponsors and lots of our friends and active partners in the campaign. So we're very excited to have you supporting the conference this year. Before I kick it off, I just want to make sure folks know that our housing data profiles have been updated on PSC's website. You can access the leading housing data for all of Connecticut's towns and cities in an online and interactive format. Each housing data profile contains a summary of important housing data in each town, and you can get the fast facts on affordable housing or do a deep dive into the distribution of your city's housing costs. We'll add the link in the chat, but please check that out when you have a moment. A few quick housekeeping items. The session is being recorded and we will make all recordings available on our YouTube channel as soon as possible. All participants have been entered muted. As this is a webinar, you will use the Q&A, the chat Q&A feature in order to ask questions that our moderator, Bill Welz, will cull through and help bring into the conversation to get questions answered that you may have. If you do have any technology questions or issues, you can reach myself. I'm Danielle Hughley, the Advocacy and Education Manager, or Chelsea Ross is our Deputy Director, are both available to you. So don't hesitate to ping us offline if you have any questions or need any troubleshooting. Finally, post-session, you can complete a session feedback survey, clicking the megaphone in the top right-hand side of your lobby. It is the megaphone icon, and we super appreciate your feedback, so please take a moment to do that. With no further ado, I'll pass it off to our moderator, Bill Welz of Gallo and Robinson, to kick off the conversation. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Danielle. And thank you to the legislators that are joining us today, who are all successful in their re-election. And we should all just congratulate public servants for their efforts in getting reelected, as that is a monumental task and it takes on a major physical and mental toll on all of them. So thank you guys all and congratulations on your reelections. I just wanted to really quick do a couple round of intros for who we have on the call. On the Zoom today. I'm very excited about our panelists. I think you guys will too. I'll start with State Representative Kristen McCarthy-Vahey, who is no stranger to this. She has done this a few times with us. She'll be going into her 5th term representing Fairfield's 133rd Assembly District. She is the House Chair of Planning and Development Committee and a member of the Government Administration and Elections Committee. And also she's on the Transportation Committee, as she's been very passionate about bicycle safety and pedestrian safety in the state of Connecticut. She's also been, for some of you who don't know, but most of the people on this conference do know, she's been integral in modernizing and reorganizing the zoning statutes to provide greater clarity to local planners to get things done. She's helped us, she's empowered towns to facilitate economic growth. And she's been working on, and she helped us pass training, affordable housing training for local planning and zoning officials, which is monumental and huge for affordable housing. On a personal note, I believe that she's very passionate about everything she works on. She does her homework and she is very straightforward on her delivery of where things are at and what she thinks she can get done. And she's been a great person to work with in the legislature, and we're thankful to have her here today. So thanks, Kristen, for joining us. We also have, I'll just go in next, we have State Representative Q Williams, who will be going into his third term representing Middletown's 100th district. He is the first African-American to represent Middletown in the General Assembly, which is huge. He is the Housing Committee Chair, and last year he has had recent success in ensuring that large cities and towns create fair rent commissions to protect tenants from unfair housing practices. He also serves on the committees related to finance, revenue, and bonding, and also the Commerce Committee. In his non-legislative life, he is the Director of Advocacy at Excellence Community Schools. All I have to say about Q is he works on really hard issues, but he always does it with a smile, as there it is. And it's a normal occurrence when I've had meetings with Rep. Williams to include a lot of laughter, at least to the point of tears. So thank you, Q, for always keeping it fun. We also have Rep. Joe Zullo, who will be serving his third term representing East Haven's 99th House District. He serves as the ranking member on both the Planning and Development Committee and the Housing Committee, and he's also on the Finance, Revenue, and Bonding Committee. He is a partner in the general law firm Zullo & Jacks in East Haven, where he concentrates in real estate and housing matters. And he currently holds a position as an adjunct professor teaching business law at Quinnipiac. And he also has served as the town attorney for the town of East Haven from 2011 to 2019. He's incredibly knowledgeable on zoning matters. He can do laps with the best on policy. And I'd say that he stays pretty even keel in even the most difficult of conversations, and has been really interesting to hear and get perspective on these issues. So thank you, Rep. Zullo, for joining us today. And I'm Bill Wells. I've done this a few times with you guys. I am the lobbyist for Gallo and Robinson. I am blessed to get to work with the Partnership for Strong Communities on these issues of affordable housing and ending homelessness, and very excited for hopefully what will be an exciting legislative session upcoming. And I guess what I wanted to kick off real quickly before we get into questions is we just had an election day last week. So I just wanted to, some of you guys are really caught up on this stuff. Some of you guys are just kind of digging in, but I just wanted to kind of give you guys the lay of land of where things are right this moment. We did have a couple of House seats that got determined just last night. So right now we're looking at, I think, a 1-seat gain on the Democratic side in the House of Representatives. So we're at 98-53. And there is one more outstanding race that's yet to be called, but I think that race is trending towards the Republican side. That's why I'm saying 98-53, but that could change at any moment on a recount, but we'll see what happens. And so in the Senate, there are 2 races that are still outstanding, but the Republicans, I believe, are in the head on both those outstanding races, which will put the Senate probably at 24-12, which is very similar to where the Senate was when they gavelled in last biennium before we had a state senator leave the Senate and a special election happened that made it different. So, a little bit of change, but I think the big difference probably on the House side is that there's some new faces on the House side, and caucuses have changed a little bit, but the numbers haven't changed too dramatically from where we're at. On Connecticut's fiscal health, just wanted to give you guys a quick update. We're looking at a potential state surplus of nearly $2.8 billion by the end of the state's fiscal year. The administration expects that these surpluses and leftover federal funding, which is roughly $1.4 billion in federal funding that's left over, will keep the state poised to maintain stable finances up to the year 2025. That's at least what they're saying as of this day. Connecticut has $3.3 billion in the rainy day fund. So any surpluses that end at the end of the year go off to pay down our long-term pension liabilities between the state pension fund and the teachers retirement fund. So just wanted to give you everybody on the call just kind of a quick lay of the land. Obviously, there's 20 points in there that we could all talk about in depth, but I wanted to just put a layout, and I wanted to jump into questions. And Representative Kristen McCarthy-Vahey did alert me that her voice is either going or gone. And so I'm going to, out of respect to that, and maybe that she might be typing, I'm going to always hold her to last so she can either catch up via chat and I'll read it, or I will, or give her time to kind of get the question out because her voice is going. So hopefully she's got some good tea by her. I'll start with Rep. Zullo on this one, if that's okay. I would like to know, what are you hearing from your constituents and local officials around housing and affordability? And do you perceive this as a statewide policy issue?
Sure, and thank you once again for the opportunity. Love participating in this. And welcome again to all my fellow colleagues. Great to see you back on screen. Can't wait to see you in person, live in the Capitol in a couple of weeks. I'm hearing it in my real estate practice. I'm hearing it. I heard it when I was knocking doors. I'm hearing it from my town officials. Quality rental supplies is wildly limited. I mean, it's bordering on a crisis. If you don't want to acknowledge it as a crisis, it's bordering on a crisis. And it's the product of a number of things, at least on the home ownership side, the purchase side, sellers don't want to sell, even at historic highs, because interest rates are significantly higher and they're locked into lower rates. And frankly, buyers don't want to buy because they can't. Either their purchasing power has been reduced due to interest rate hikes, or frankly, they're priced out of the market due to the rise of prices. And then all of that is trickling into the rental market as well, where because of increased home heating costs, increased utility costs, et cetera, rental prices, are through the roof. And so there's a shortage of quality housing, which we've had for a while. And I say quality because there is housing available in other respects, but it's not necessarily quality housing. There are issues with that housing. And then I think as we go on through these questions today, I look forward to talking about ways, that we can address that, because we do have an existing stock of housing that I think can be utilized to address some of this crisis right away. But I think we need to get to work on that in the next session. But that's my take.
Rep. Q, can I pass it to you?
Oh, once again, thank you, Bill, for having me here. Actually, I got nervous for a moment when you said what our meetings are most likely. I'm glad you said smiles. I thought you were going to say cussing, and I got really scared that my mom might be watching this too and knows about her poor little baby. But anyways, once again, I'm Q Williams from the great city of Middletown. If you've ever eaten in Middletown, you've eaten in my district. And I said, I appreciate this question, and I'm actually really glad that Rep. Zullo started, because there's a lot that I think we can agree on, no matter what your political party is, whether you're from an urban area or suburban area or a rural area. The fact of the matter is that we do not have enough housing for all budgets, period. For our most affluent and wealthy that are coming from some of our biotech organizations or medicine or from defense. I think those folks aren't finding the housing stock available because I think people are holding it on, or because of interest rates, so their buying power is down, like Representative Zullo said. And I think those with the least affluency, some of our most poorest, are also not finding affordable housing options either. So we agree that we do not have enough housing for all budgets, period. And I think the only way to solve that, because we don't have a demand problem. We don't. Connecticut is a great place to live for numerous reasons. I said we have a dynamic business environment and climate for both our largest organizations and for our independent business owners. We have an educational system at the higher ed that is phenomenal. And I think at the early education, I think it could do a little bit better in many places, but still something to be very proud of. Connecticut is a great place to live. So the only way to solve this is by increasing supply. And we need to make policies that increase supply throughout our entire state. I mean, I know that is what my goal is if I continue to be chair of housing. But that was what my goal was last year too, that I want to help put forth policies that create more housing, period.
McCarthy-Vey.
Thank you, and I'm going to do my best. I hope folks can hear me, and it's wonderful to see everybody. Ditto to what the good representatives have said, and we have a shortage of supply, period. The governor wants to attract new residents and businesses. In order to do that, we need places for people to live that people can afford, and also that are near the workplace. COVID changed commuting patterns. Traffic is really bad again in Fairfield County. Less people are on the train. That's one of the reasons why I'm interested in bike and pedestrian infrastructure, not just safety, because we need different options, people. Federal actions, the Fed and rising rates, as Rep. Williams and Zullo have alluded to, have impacted And what I will say is, when I knocked doors this summer and fall in Bridgeport and in Fairfield, I met many families with 3 generations living in a home, and in some cases 4. Many multi-generational families who they don't love each other and want to be together, but they're not together by choice. The families with young children who want to be able to move out into their own homes or apartments, and they can't. There's nowhere for them to go.
You all worked on important legislation related to housing stability, housing affordability, zoning, and ending homelessness, not only during the 22 legislative session, but also the 2021 legislative session. Could you tell us what provision of any of those pieces of legislation you were most excited to pass? Is there anything you would consider going back to change? And I'll start with Q on this one.
So 2 things. I think one, the changes to the budget that we did, increasing money for the CAN network, I think increasing funds for the 211 system, increasing funds for evictions, there are so many different ways that if you needed help and support, the state of Connecticut put more funds in to provide additional support. So I'm really proud of the financial things. On the policy side, I am still very proud of passing the expansions of the RIT commissions for any towns that have over 25,000 people. There now will be required to have one by July 1st, I think it is. This is a policy that there's been tons of support from numerous partners, including CCM. So for any of our municipalities that are having trouble figuring out what their resolution or ordinance could look like, CCM has model legislation ready for you right now for big towns, for our smallest towns, all the way to our biggest cities. Clinton has a really good example, along with the city of New Haven. But once again, we have partners like CCM that are ready to go for doing this. And what this policy really does is allow for dynamic conversations and fair conversations between parties that probably don't disagree on a lot of things. But I think how quickly the personal becomes political in terms of where you live and your housing. Sometimes we may not be able to hear each other. And this becomes a fair and unbiased channel amongst peers to be able to help you navigate these conversations when you are facing unfair rent hikes. And I think the first question always comes is, how do you know it's unfair? One, you have your peers to be able to help you kind of figure that out and have that discussion. But also, I think out of the 20 different criteria that our rent commission can look at, 17 of the criteria are market-based. So this policy is a market-based solution and providing a channel of conversation between property owners and residents.
Rep. Zullo?
Thank you. So my counter, the good Madam Chair on P&D is going to laugh when I talk about my second one. The first is a housing bill that didn't get taken up actually in the House, but I was very proud to work on it in Housing Committee and support it in Housing Committee. And it was SB 291, and it was the Act Concerning Protections for Group and Family Child Care Homes. You know, I come from East Haven, where a lot of our educational model for a number of years was that neighborhood model of schools, the neighborhood school model, where we had a lot of smaller schools and kids were able to walk to school. There were close bonds between the neighborhoods and the schools. And, you know, group and family child care homes provide a similar type of learning environment and a similar type of convenience, but in the family child care setting, where family, you know, not everyone can bring their child to a large institutional child care facility. Not everyone can afford that. But on the same token, a lot of families are able to make additional money, make a decent living, frankly, providing these types of childcare services. But unfortunately, there are inhibitions to getting into it, staying into it, and you run into a lot of issues in the interplay between landlords and tenants who operate these types of businesses. One of the things that I was very proud to see happen in Housing Committee, and it's happened for a couple of years in a row now, is that we've tried to put forth protections for these group and family childcare homes to make sure that they can operate without too much of an onerous interference from landlords. We still want to protect the rights of landlords, particularly on the side of insurance, particularly in their property rights, but we want to make sure that these types of group and family childcare homes can succeed and prosper, because they really do provide vital and quality childcare for thousands of families across the state. The second bill, and again, the good Madam Chair is going to laugh, but HB 5165, the Plan of Conservation and Development, that meant a lot this year that we got that through the House. You can't get anywhere without a meaningful plan. And too much of what we do is patchwork. And having a holistic, a comprehensive plan as far as the state goes is important. And the state's setting an example by saying we're going to not only pass this plan, but we're going to provide a framework for the future for passing meaningful plans and making sure we're accountable to ourselves to pass these plans. I think that's important. It's the state saying we're going to lead by example. And I do credit the good chair for really making sure that was a priority last year in getting it out of the House.
It feels like a long time we've been watching that plan of conservation and development, and I don't even think third time's a charm. I'm not sure where we're at, but I know I've been watching it up on the board and watch you guys battle that in committee and talk about it. Rep. McCarthy-Vahey.
Save my voice more for some of the other questions. I think it's great what we've been able to do, but there's a whole lot more we've got to do for there.
Fair enough. We'll move around a little bit. What opportunities do you think exist for affordable housing policy running into the 2023 session? And I'll start with Rep. Zullo on this one.
Sure. So, obviously we have Connecticut's, the Commission on Connecticut's Development and Future, which is going to be producing a body of recommendations on affordable housing, particularly for those at low and very low income levels. So I eagerly await seeing what that subcommittee is going to produce. But in the meantime, we certainly have challenges that we can tackle. We have a lot of families, we have a lot of individuals that are on the fringe as far as home ownership goes. Teachers, first responders, laborers, those who want to be homeowners, but for whatever reason, there remain impediments to acquisition. And we talked about some of those before: high interest rates, high property values, et cetera, et cetera. The state's coffers are in reportedly good shape, as you just talked about at the very beginning of this presentation. I support a multi-year income-based tax credit, $500, $750, linked to purchase, to the purchase of workforce housing or acquisitions by those of certain income levels, perhaps those in the trades or certain other professions. We need to start breaking down some of these barriers for people on the fringe. And this year, I also intend to reintroduce my proposal to allow towns, but not require towns, to give a $500 per year, up to 5-year first-time home buyer credit for anybody acquiring a home with a CHFA first-time home buyer loan. Again, I see it in my real estate practice, working with a lot of lenders across the state. You have so many people where their debt to income ratio comes down to $50, $80, $100 a month. These credits, would allow people to get into these homes, acquire these homes, continue to build wealth, and address an issue for those on the fringe. So I think those on the fringe should be a focus this year.
Rep. McCarthy-Vahey.
Thanks, Bill. And my apologies to everyone about my voice. Timing's not great, I know. I've been, particularly in last year's session, we had a good start with the changes to our zoning regulations and the reorganization, the requirements for training. Interestingly, just today, someone pointed out to me an article in the Wall Street Journal related to the Airbnb co-founder, who has a new startup called Samara. I think it's basically to allow, factory produced and 1-bedroom homes in people's backyards, because in a place like California, not dissimilar to Fairfield County, Connecticut, housing market is incredibly difficult. We have to do more to put more tools in the toolboxes of our municipalities and really strongly incentivize, encourage, and really push for that ability to have conversations about how and where we develop. Here in Fairfield, we've seen a lot of very difficult conversations happening related to density and development and where that development occurs. And the forces of the market, the ability for developers to charge much higher rents, has meant that we've seen more demand with development, but also we already talked about the demand on the side of those who are looking for a place to live. We've got to continue these conversations in productive ways, in ways that acknowledge the real issues, in ways that acknowledge the differences between and among communities, and how we work regionally while supporting our cities and also offering alternatives in our communities. We're going to need to continue and expand on those conversations. I often go to ADUs because I think sometimes that's a low-hanging fruit, or it provides a real viable alternative. You know, for the article I'm talking about references multi-generational living, but also the changing patterns of work and the needs. We all are remote right now. The article even references getting away from noisy children. So family and group cares are helpful for that. So it's a different kind of space. So we've got to continue having all of those zoning conversations in addition to providing funding support. And I will say zoning starts with planning. We have to do more to fund and provide technical support to our communities and our regions for planning purposes, and having the kinds of conversations that were successful in Fairfield many years ago when we created a zoning overlay district that now has allowed for the kind of development that is currently happening in a thriving, now newly thriving area of town.
I'm laughing at Kristen with a noisy children comment. I just had my third child. She's 4 weeks old now, and you know, God bless the neighbors. Q.
Yeah, my big goal for the 2023 year is to get past one of the words that often comes up in our legislature and in the state of Connecticut, and that's the word "but" and the BUT, right? The conjunction, because I think what ends up happening is we often talk about how important our values are and how important things are to the state, or how we need to move forward, or here's what it is. But then we caveat it with the word "but," and then completely contradict everything that we said before, and then only focus on the challenges or the weaknesses and the things that we feel like we can't get past. And I feel like that's been a hindrance to us moving forward in building the sort of housing stock that is going to sustain our business climate that we need. And it's also going to make sure that we can have the continuity of communities that we would like in our entire state. I mean, a good example is there's a place called Stonegate here in Middletown. They significantly raised rents. I think it was like anywhere from 25 to 50% for the same apartment. And these were predominantly seniors that can no longer stay in the communities that they raise their children in. They can't be near their grandchildren. They had to figure out what they're going to do about their spiritual home, so on and so forth. I mean, just really uprooting families and uprooting residents in a way that I would feel is unconscionable. And I said the number one way to fix that is by building more housing stock. And I'm going to say that almost ad nauseum over and over and over again. And I do think some of the things that we can do is relieve barriers for those that can build affordable housing and mixed income housing, and let them be treated like any other developer. I think that's one of the things that we need to be able to do. I think part of this solution is again, using funds to be able to promote the right sort of housing where we would like it to be. And then we also have to go back and recognize the municipalities that have consistently been building housing for all budgets, and how do we recognize them for doing what's right all along. We're going to need to use all the tools in a toolbox, but I think the first thing that we have to kind of face ourselves in the mirror around is our willpower and desire to getting a housing stock that actually is going to sustain our business client and sustain the growth of Connecticut.
I'll just note.
May I add one more thing to that? And because I forgot something that Representative McCarthy-Vahey had shared, is that it starts with planning. It really does start with planning. And I think as a former P&Z commissioner, I know just how powerful that can be. And if we are going to suggest that it starts with planning, it becomes incredibly disheartening knowing that at the original deadline for 830G, about a third of our municipalities didn't even turn in the plan. So it's very difficult to move in the right direction if we fail to plan. So I think that is going to be the first step. And then we can move forward in creating solutions around how do we build enough housing stock.
If I may jump in, I think Rep. Williams meant 830J, which
Jay,
was
thank you.
requirement. And also, I want to just emphasize, planning is the first step, but planning doesn't build housing. So we have to plan properly and bring communities together to do that. And then we have to be able to execute that so that we have actual spaces for people to live.
Bill, on
Yeah.
the issue of housing stock, just really quickly, I just want to add I know Rep. Williams said the but, you know, the caveat. I'm going to add a caveat at the risk of, no, I just want to note that, you know, I think we agree that we need to increase housing stock. My caveat to that is that it needs to get into the hands of the housing stock we create needs to get into the hands of working families, not corporations, not large corporate landholders or landlords. But the problem is if we create more housing, that's great. But if all it does is create more rental housing, and if all it does is create more rental housing that's affordable, but eventually becomes market rate, we're creating cures for a problem in the short term, but exacerbating the problem in the long term. So not only do I feel that we need to create housing stock, but we really need to figure out how to get it into the hands of individuals, you know, emerging families, first-time home buyers, people that are going to hold on to it to build wealth so that they can determine their own futures, not so that they're not subject to such fluctuations in the market. So not so much a caveat, but saying, yes, I agree. Let's also tweak it to make sure that we're empowering these people to continue to determine their own futures and, you know, build their own wealth.
Bye, Kristen.
I think that's a great point, because we are seeing these private equity firms and folks who are investing in real estate. That's the free market. So the challenge that we have as policymakers is how to create policy that addresses that. And I think that the point that Zulu is making underscores the very important role of our housing authority. When we have housing that's available to people at all income levels, that is then, you know, it's deed restricted or in perpetuity, so that those are not happening. And I think we are going to have to do more to talk about how we work together with our housing authorities. And we've had some of those conversations, but that hasn't gotten across the finish line.
And I should have said this in the beginning, but for my panelists, just have at it and keep talking. Before I go to next questions, I don't want to cut any of you off, and I definitely think that the free flow of conversation is important, and it's important for everybody to hear that. And you guys are getting a taste of the legislative process, right? There's a clash of ideas that usually come together to create policy, and that's how we make things. And you know, and I think everybody on this call would probably agree that. You know, there's really no one-sided issues that, you know, the one-sided issues that leave the legislature are far and few. Most things come together through a consensus building process and through the work of both parties. So it's great to have you guys. So yeah, feel free. Don't let me start another question if you have another thought. I'm gonna hop to the Futures Commission. Well, I call it the Futures Commission, but the Commission on Connecticut's Development and Future. Which passed in 2021. You're all members of it in some capacity. You all sit on some subcommittees. Some of you sit on multiple. Just want to, if somebody could address, you know, maybe I'll give the beginning part to Kristen, where it is in the process, and then also looking at what's the overall timeline, and then maybe I could ask all of you, what are your hopes that it will accomplish, and you know, what do you think is going to come out of it? I'll start with McCarthy-Vahey on the process and timeline.
Bill, thank you for starting with me. The commission was something that I had talked about with other members in the creation of that bill as we were trying to get the bill across the finish line. And we heard from people in the communities about wanting to have a voice. And when we opened that up, you know, somewhere around 80 to 90 people agreed to participate in the various working groups, which is phenomenal, and people have been engaged in the process together with agencies and legislators. It has been an opportunity for a lot of voices to come together. We're coming up on the first deadline for those recommendations to be put forward by the working group to the commission members. And just so folks know, the working groups, like I said, were opened up. The commission members were appointed members. So those working groups have folks from all over the state from a variety of different perspectives and backgrounds. So it will be in the first week of December, the commission as a whole will be meeting to look at the recommendations. I know a lot of working groups are working hard to get those recommendations in place. I have to give a special shout out to OPM and Pika Auger, who's been helping us in our working group, doing a phenomenal job. But the hope is that those recommendations can then go to legislative leaders to look at what legislative initiative makes sense putting forward. And I'll give a great example. Rep. Zullo talked about the state plan of conservation and development. We passed the plan, and we also passed the bill, pushing the process back a bit, but we have a lot of conversation about how that process needs to work and what needs to happen as we plan for our state, who the stakeholders are, how those plans should work with agencies, how those plans should fit with local plans of conservation and development. All those things are things we hope to bring forward in the recommendations, and that's just one working group. That's one of the things we did last year, was also extend the timeline of the commission. So this will be the first deadline. That commission will continue through next year as well.
And I have to say, from a lobbyist perspective, and from working the building, sometimes you hear commission and task force, and you're like, oh man, this is kind of the legislative way of not doing something or taking a lot longer to do something. But I have to say, what's very exciting about this commission, what I think is very cool about this commission, and what I think is different about this commission, is I've never seen a commission set up in this way, where there's so many folks that are ingrained in the there's advocates on it, there's planners on it, there's people from municipalities are on it, but then they're sitting side by side with legislators. And as I said, all three members are on this call, or on this, plus many more. And it's almost like it feels like, at least right now, and we'll see how this thing goes, is like almost a mini proving ground to the legislature. Obviously, the more you fan things out in the legislature, the more people are like, oh, what are they doing? And here's what I have to think about it. But it's exciting to see the real commitment from all of you on this, and for actually kind of working this out on the side before bringing it to the legislative process, where we know things get worked out even more. Rep. Zullo, what are your hopes for the commission?
Well, to the credit of the good chair of housing, Rep. Williams, and I think the good chairwoman mentioned it before too. It's important to have a good plan, period. And as you just said, this is one of the first times I think that we're not doing something patchwork. A lot of times when you say we're doing studies or we're doing a task force, we get one here, we get one there, and maybe they meet, maybe they don't meet, maybe they produce a result, maybe they don't. And this is one of the first times, at least in my short tenure in the legislature, where I really am seeing a comprehensive approach to this, where we're going to come back and be able to identify the way, not only these things, not only the way to address affordable housing or plans of conservation development, sewerage systems individually, but how they actually are all going to relate together. Because, when it comes, whether it's housing or the budget, you can't tackle one thing unless you're able to actually tackle them all, or at least be able to account for how what you do in one area affects the other area. So I think that's what's really unique and what's really special about this committee. So that's what I'm most looking forward to. And again, in the legislature, I can't even begin to try to figure out how many bills are actually proposed every year and how many we look at. The other thing that's nice about this commission is that it did gather subject matter experts from across the state, people who really have a lot of knowledge, institutional knowledge in these various areas, and being able to have that knowledge, in one document, which is really a huge information shortcut for legislators to be able to look at and say, these are the high notes, these are the things that, these experts identified. That's going to be a huge help as we really look to shape policy going forward. So, those are, obviously two easy things to say that we can look forward to.
Rep. Williams?
I think the two previous speakers said most of the things that I would have said, so I can move on to the next question. It's fine.
And I did see a note in here, and I just wanted to address it because we did get a question. Is there someone representing justice impacted communities on this commission? Not laid out explicitly in the statute. The partnership can maybe send out some information on the membership. It is available on their website. If you go to the CJA website on the Commission of Connecticut's Development Future, the membership is laid out there. It's a big commission. It's 36 members, but there are folks, there are a lot of experts in the field on housing and zoning and what have you. But something to talk to legislator leaders, of course, about adding additional members. I'm sure folks are always open to the dialogue about if we're missing voices on any commission in the state of Connecticut. I saw Kristen, you had your hand up. I don't want to leave you hanging.
No, thank you. And I appreciate that point, and very much that is an important perspective and has been part of the conversation, if not specifically represented. But I also just wanted to give a shout out to the Majority Leader's office for the support that they have provided. That goes to the point of having the infrastructure to allow for this kind of conversation and planning. And again, I referenced OPM and our working group as tremendous support. Those foundational pieces and those background, those sometimes behind the scenes are what allow us to do some of this work. And I know Rep. Lewis last night say this, it's like the GIS conversation. We need to have those background pieces of information, the availability to have that support. And so I do want to say that the Majority Leader's office has been, along with OPM and Engine, behind this process. We wouldn't be here without them.
Moving on. I'm just monitoring the chat. I'm trying to take some of your questions in while also doing some of this live. But I think I know Rep. McCarthy-Vahey answered this in one of her questions, but maybe I'll kick this to Rep. Zullo and Rep. Williams as well. Is there any low-hanging fruit that you guys think are there, either in the housing on the zoning side, that you think that with just a little bit of muster you could probably get this passed, and that something maybe agreeable?
I'm sorry, can you answer that? Say that question again, please.
So low-hanging fruit, like no fiscal note, maybe no heat left over, something where that was left over, that it was like, why didn't we get that done? And I think Rep. Zullo kind of started talking about that too with the childcare stuff, because I think there was a little bit more work on it. But is there anything that you were kind of like, I can't believe we didn't get that done because we really should have? And I'll start with Rep. Zullo on this one.
So sure. I mean, I think the group family childcare home, it's been vetted multiple times in housing. Advocates won me over early in my first year. It has bipartisan support, at least in me. It still has some kinks to be worked out, but it's floor ready, and it's something that we can do that'll immediately have an impact. Another pet project of the good chair on P&D, 5171 last year, an act concerning abandoned blighted property receivership. Right now, towns under, I think it's 35,000, they don't have the ability to petition the Superior Court for appointment of a receiver for blighted or abandoned properties. A lot of towns across the state, particularly with the changing economy, are dealing with blighted properties. And this is a tool that we can immediately put in towns' tool belts that'll have no fiscal impact as far as changing this threshold, but that will allow towns of small and medium size, another manner to tackle blight. I'm not saying we have to do it for towns under 5,000 or even 10,000, but to give a town like mine in East Haven, we're under 35,000 and don't have this tool right now. To give a town like East Haven this kind of tool would allow us, the ability, additional zoning options as far as blight goes. So that's, those are two areas that immediately that I can say.
Rep. Williams?
Well, when 5171 gets put back in, count me in as a co-sponsor. I'll gladly join in on that one. And I think this is where I think it's the struggle is, right? Is that there's so much we agree on, and oftentimes it's the 1% or the 5% that stops everything from moving. So, Representative Zullo and I agree on the child care bill. I have no clue why there was 20 amended filings in the Senate side. I don't know, but we agree how important it is, and we know how important these child care facilities are after COVID. We literally couldn't get our economy started because we didn't have a place for our children to go. So these are integral to child development, and they're integral to our business foundations. So I will gladly join in co-sponsoring or co-introducing a bill just like that. I also share concerns about our funds going to corporate interests that may not have the needs and desires of our residents and the state as a whole in the best interest. So I will gladly join in co-introducing a bill again regarding housing authorities who have the capacity, who have the expertise to be able to do additional housing outside of their immediate municipal jurisdiction. I hope Representative Zullo joins me in co-introducing that with me. I would love for him to do that with me. I would say we both agree that the corporate interests aren't the right way. Here's a way to do so. And the fact of the matter is that the state of Connecticut is in smaller in landmass than numerous counties in Arizona, numerous counties in New Mexico, numerous counties in Arizona, numerous counties in Nevada, numerous counties in Oregon. The list goes on and on. These are decisions would never be made at a municipal level and anywhere in the west side of the country, and a lot of places in the Midwest, but yet we still do it here. So I would gladly have him join me in that bill and hope that he does so this year. I think some other ones that I know that I think there should be some quick agreement on. There was a bill, let me just give you the quick number really quick. I think it is 5234. It passed near unanimous in the House. I hope the Senate takes it up this year. That is a bill that talks about the rights and responsibilities of both landlords and tenants. Pretty straightforward bill around how much you can charge for credit reports, making sure that everyone has a checklist of what they're going to be assessed on both at the coming into the apartment and leaving the apartment. I think that's an easy one to get across the finish line very quick. And then there's another one that I want to put a lot of emphasis on this year. It's a bill that would allow for property owners to give alternatives to security deposits. And this is a low-cost way for those that can't put forward the $1,000, $2,000, or some places like I know New Canaan, some of the rents were like $3,000. So you're talking about $6,000 just to be able to enter. And that's just for your deposit. It doesn't even include your first month. So you're talking close to 10 G's just to get into your apartment. Here is a model that is based off of Virginia and a few other states that we have molded to actually make work here in Connecticut that would give low cost entry to apartments that I think is a win-win for everyone.
I'll jump in. I could not agree more about receivership. As Rep. Zullo knows, I continue to fight for that one and will continue. And the family and group child care, I couldn't have worked without that option. And I really am in strong support. And I know previous P&D chair, Rep. Lamar, worked on that issue as well. So I agree, it's been vetted. It's time for us to pass that bill. This is not low-hanging fruit, but it's a necessity and something we need to talk about, which is transit-oriented development. We've got to figure out, again, that goes to the planning side of things. In order to add units, we have a need for density because we want to protect our farmlands and protect our forests. And we want to figure out where that density should be. It makes sense, even with changing commuting patterns, to look at those issues. And we didn't have it quite where we needed it to be. That's why we didn't vote on that bill in committee. But those conversations need to continue so that we can look very heartily at how our state is developing and where we are developing density and looking at the issues of infrastructure that's alternative transportation infrastructure that allows safe walking. We know we had a high profile president who was just seriously injured in a bicycling accident. With e-bikes coming online, I'm seeing them more in our community for people to get around. So we've got to think about all of those things too.
I don't want to fire up the conversation too much, but we did have some questions in the chat, and I'm reading some, and I'm trying to get to some of them. Going back to the affordable housing plans, we do have a question in the chat that, with some of these plans still missing, if they're not going in, would the legislature ever consider an incentive or a penalty to make sure that the 830J is effective moving forward? Kristen wants to go ahead, you could start.
Thank you. I'm jumping in because that was part of the thought with one of the working groups with the Commission on Connecticut's development and future, was for them to take a look at what would we be looking for in those plans, and if those things are not existent or they're not being turned in, then what incentives or perhaps the things that we're withholding would need to be put in place. That's one of the conversations that I'm hoping that we will be able to have as a result of some of the work of the working group.
And maybe I'll treat some of these as rapid fire. So if somebody else wanted to answer that question, please just hands up or just go ahead, or if not, I'll keep going.
And I can add in really quick. I had sent an email to OPM about a month ago. I said I was trying to reach out to the clerk of the committee, William Cromwell, who was an awesome public administrator for our state. So wanted to just give him a shout out for all his hard work and phenomenal work. But we have not received a response from OPM yet. But the moment we get it, I'll make sure we share that answer regarding what we can do and should do for those municipalities that chose not to sit in their 830J plans.
The other question that I have sitting out here, and maybe I'll go, this is kind of more of a housing committee question, so I'll Zullo and Q. Folks are looking to understand if there's some actions that can be taken to address poor quality of housing in the state of Connecticut.
I mean, if you don't mind, Mr. I'll go for it. It goes to, some of the notes that I prepared heading into today. I think that's a big problem that we have in the state. I was looking at the data set on housing complaints, and there were over 2,300 last year reported. And those are just the ones that were reported. I mean, that's a small subset of what's really going on out there. And again, I don't think it's the mom and pops that are renting out their ADU or renting out the home the extra home that's been passed down in their families. It's these large corporate landholders that, are trying to increase their bottom lines at the expense of people who need good quality housing. So, if you were to ask me, immediately what we need to do is we need to ramp up housing code enforcement. We need to give towns the tools that they need to appropriately crack down on absentee landlords, serial bad landlords, to make sure that we're providing safe housing. Because again, I think we have a larger housing stock than we actually have. It's just, it's artificially limited by the fact that some of it just isn't, it's not fit for it to be rented out, frankly. So that's a great first step. And I would be very interested in getting together and working on and supporting legislation that would help towns to be able to do that, because I think that's a serious problem we have right now.
So I'm glad that I had already sent a message to Representative Zullo saying that I'm going to come down to his neighborhood and I'll even buy the first beer so I can see some of the issues that he's talking about. Because once again, there's so much that we agree on. I think one of the things regarding code enforcement is that I think we do need some specific language of what municipalities are missing for their code enforcement and why they can't already do that kind of work already. So if there's any policy change that we need to do, please send those over to my office or the Representative Zullo's office ASAP so that we can get that ball rolling. I will also share that if a property owner does raise the rent and it is unsustainable for living, that is an exact sort of situation that can be brought forward to a rent commission to look at both, to look at the increase in rent and to look at the conditions of the property. So if your municipality does not have a rent commission, this is why we have the problem, right? Like we have a solution on the table that can help address it. But if we are slow rolling that implementation, it is causing for our overall stock to not be at the quality that it can be, and it's also affecting the amount of quantity that we have for our housing stock.
All right, and we're getting close to time here, so I'm gonna end with my kind of my favorite question. It's the if you had $10 million on either the appropriations or the bonding side, which everybody got it. If you had $10 million, what would you do? But as a legislator right now, what would you do with it, or how would you leverage it? I'll start with Rep. McCarthy-Vahey.
Well, I know the practical piece is probably take that money and leverage the ability to have organizations use it to borrow and produce more housing. But I also have to say, what I really want to say is to invest it into our GIS and planning infrastructure. And that's where we get into the struggles of where we go. But if we're really going to have to invest more in both of those areas to be able to move us forward in the long term.
Representative Zullo, $10 million.
I think Rep. McCarthy-Vahey's response is practical and appropriate. It's the practical, answer. I'm going to be shameless and say that I would love to put it into my pet program, the CHAFA first time home buyer legislation that I have proposed. I would love to see it piloted and see how it would affect municipalities and if it would actually work. Sometimes we come up with these ideas and in theory they're great, and then you put them into practice and nobody takes advantage of it. $10 million, you could actually probably do it for about 300 to 500 people. So it would be a great way to pilot it in certain towns, maybe even those that are right on the fringe as far as meeting their affordable housing requirements, meeting that 10% threshold. So you might even see some of those towns qualify if we pilot it in those towns. So I'm going to be shameless and plug my own legislation and say that's what I would use it for. But in all honesty, while I'd love to do that, something more practical along the lines of what the good chair of P&D mentioned would probably be more appropriate.
Nothing shameless about legislation that's intended to help people buy homes. I think that it's an honorable goal. Representative Williams, $10 million, no strings. What would you do with it?
In the spirit of bipartisanship, I would at least give $1 million to Representative Zullo's policy to see if he starts to support some more of my stuff too. But beyond that, as I said, my number one goal is to build more housing. And I think there are numerous developers that are doing things in the right way. I'll give a shout out to Montgomery Mill in Windsor, which is a TLD project. It is a mixed income development. It is a reuse of a former space that would not, that cannot go back to like the old sort of manufacturing that we've had in days. So it's an environmental project. It is every single thing that we would want for housing development in the state of Connecticut. And if you try to recreate that, that same sort of space anywhere on the 91 corridor and anywhere on that sort of Metro North corridor, you can't do it because of planning rules, right? So I would want to be able to figure out how do we give those sort of funds to developers like them so that we can create those sort of developments, which we can all be proud of, and increase our housing stock and make sure that everyone of all budgets can live in Connecticut that's so choose to do so.
I would say, sometimes I look at a question and I'm like, challenge the dateness of it. I think there was a time when probably $10 million on a budget side seemed like a lot, but we start looking at seeing all proposals and things going out in the legislature where the price tag's just a lot larger just due to inflation, supply constraints, what have you. But, maybe next year I got to ask you guys what you're going to do with 50 to 100, because it just 10 million just, it hardly seems like enough to get a lot done. But I appreciate all of your answers, and I appreciate the three of you coming today to talk to us, and for everybody to hear from us. I'm sorry, folks, if I couldn't get to all the questions. I did my best to squeeze everybody's in and try to sift through it. But I thank you to the three legislators for taking time out, especially after Election Day, when they definitely are taking some time with their families now. And Danielle, I didn't know if there's anything else that needed to be said, but you can come back on if there's anything for the next conference that needs to be said.
No, I think we're all set. Thank you so much for joining us today. It was an honor to have you all.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.